Well, hot August nights was sure cool.
That was a lot of fun.
Man,
Wow.
I just like to take about a dozen of those cars home.
Right.
At the auction, you almost could.
You could.
Well, anyway, we're on our way over to Sacramento, which is just on the other side of the hill, actually. It's quite a hill, but it's just on the other side of the hill. It's on the other side of the Sierra Nevada mountains.
That's a hill.
And we're going over Donner Summit right here, but we're doing it the old way. We're taking US 40, the old highway, because it's much more entertaining
Right.
than 80, Interstate 80. But more importantly, you can see the old transcontinental railroad that was carved out up here in 1866 by the Chinese
Right.
when they built this railroad to Sacramento, and not any farther than Sacramento. The Pacific Railroad actually ended at Sacramento, not at the Pacific Ocean, because the river was there. And we'll look at the river and some of the cool and interesting things in Sacramento too. It's very, very interesting history.
Nice.
The Transcontinental Railroad was created by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War and completed in 1869. Much of the western part of this was built by Chinese workers. The American workers decided the work was way too hard and dangerous, and so the Central Pacific was forced to import tens of thousands of Chinese laborers. The line had to be dug out entirely by hand. They didn't even have dynamite. All they had was black powder and nitroglycerin. This area is called Cape Horn. It's just west of Donner Summit on the California side. A lot of Chinese laborers were killed in this area. It's here at Colfax, California. And this is the Donner Summit Tunnel. They had to drive this tunnel under the summit in order to get the trains through, again, using black powder and nitroglycerin. It proved to be so difficult that they dug a vertical shaft to the middle of the tunnel so that they could work on 4 faces at the same time: east, west, center right, and center left. You can still see here where the hand drills were used to tap in to place black powder or nitroglycerin to blow the rock away. Nitroglycerin is incredibly dangerous and many died. Now, outside of the tunnel, it really wasn't that much easier. People hadn't realized just how deep the snow gets up here. They probably should have talked to the members of the Donner Reed wagon train about that. At any rate, much of the line had to be built inside snow sheds to keep the snow off the tracks. It was the only way they could keep the line open in the winter. And so miles and miles of these snow sheds had to be built over the summit. The sheds were rebuilt over the years, finally being redone in concrete, and in 1993, the entire line was abandoned in favor of a more modern route. The Central Pacific had started here in Sacramento at the river and then built east up into the Sierra Nevada mountains. They didn't feel a need to start on the Pacific coast because you could get riverboats down from here. In fact, Sacramento was sort of like the New Orleans of the West. Sacramento emerged as a major riverboat capital, and a ton of traffic was running downriver from here to San Francisco carrying people and freight. This is the Delta King, a passenger ship that ran on the line back then. It was allowed to fall into disrepair and, well, in fact, the darn thing actually sank. But fortunately, it was raised and renovated, and it's back in Sacramento now as a hotel and restaurant and meeting room complex. As Karen and I are on our honeymoon, we decided to spend 2 nights here on the riverboat. That was really fun. What a great way to see Sacramento and really get a sense of what this place was like when it was the New Orleans of the West. The old original part of Sacramento has been renovated and preserved as Old Sacramento. This is the Big 6 building This is where the Central Pacific was founded when the 6 investors met here and put together the idea for the railroad. The Delta King is sure a fun place to spend a couple of days. Definitely recalls a time when riverboat was one of the great ways to get around. You know, that and trains, of course. And Old Sacramento is awfully fun to check out too. It's become sort of a hodgepodge of touristy little shops and restaurants and bars. But oh, good grief, it's just an awful lot of fun and a great place to spend some time screwing around. There's some great history here in Sacramento. Now, one of the interesting things is really only noticed if you pay attention. These alleys kind of dip down into a low area, and these little low areas are seen all over the place. What the heck are these little low areas like this? Well, that's the original ground level of Sacramento. Just as in its sister city, New Orleans, Sacramento had a tendency to flood a great deal. The river would rise, and no amount of leveeing seemed to be able to prevent that. So the decision was made that in order to prevent this kind of damage, they would raise the entire city. So the sidewalks were built up to meet the second floor on the buildings, and some of the buildings were jacked up to the level of the new sidewalks. If you look closely, you can find the ground floors of some of these buildings still sort of poking out. They're basements now. Some buildings were just simply abandoned as there was no way to raise them up or do anything with them. Some of these low areas are utilized as courtyards or little patios for restaurants and so on. Adds a really interesting character to Old Town Sacramento. And if you go into the basements of some of the buildings, you can find the old original ground floors, which are now under the existing ground floors. This is the underground city on Steve Stribble's O-scale model railroad, Underground Ironton. It's very reminiscent of Sacramento. Old Town Sacramento is also home to the California State Railroad Museum. Gee, I think we should take a closer look at this, and we're going to next week. But Old Town Sacramento is sure a lot of fun. What a great thing that this has been preserved as a place to go and screw around. That's Old Town Sacramento.
Old Town Sacramento, that is so cool.
It is so cool, and there's a part of it that we didn't show you yet because that's next week's show, and that's the Sacramento Railroad Museum. So you really must tune in next week to see that, because it's my favorite museum, I think, in America. It's
cool.
One of America's greatest railroad museums. It's amazing.
Lots of history.
Lots of history, and it's in Sacramento, which is pretty darn cool too.
Right.
Well, if you haven't been to the website, that's toymantelevision.com. Of course, we're all over Facebook too. Toyman Television on Facebook. You can like and follow on Facebook and those kinds of things.
Right.
Because we share over there and that. Or the simple thing, subscribe to the channel by clicking the blue button.
Right.
Simple. Totally simple. Well, we're not sure how you found this wonderful movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again next week with the Sacramento Railroad Museum. See ya. Bye.